So really quick introduction to asset-based community development. It's an approach to sustainable community-driven development beyond the mobilisation of a particular community. It is concerned with how to link micro assets to the macro environment. And I'll share a little bit of our work that we're starting to explore what that means in practice. Asset-based community development premise is that communities can drive the development process themselves by identifying and mobilising existing but often unrecognised assets, thereby responding to challenges and creating local social improvement and economic development. I think that's the nurture development definition. An organisation is worth looking at. So co-production is, in a sense, is an asset-based approach. It's an approach that looks for opportunities and resources and assets that already exist and maximises the opportunities associated with them. So our organisation, ACE, it grew out of work through communities first. So I started employed by the local authority about 12 years ago, moved into Ely and Curry a year later. We developed a whole load of stuff that I would say was based on traditional community development work, building networks of local people, building relationships in a community, bringing people together around needs and interests. And then we had this whole conversation, well, what happens after communities first? How do we build power in our organisation? How do we create something that's owned by local people, driven by local people, and that might outlast the whole communities first kind of thing? So we formed ACE with local people about 6-7 years ago. We now have a membership of over 1,000 local people. They elect their own board of trustees. For those of you interested in this sort of thing, we're a company and a charity. And we have broad sort of regeneration aims and very explicitly base our work on values and principles of co-production and asset-based community development. So we had this aim that we wanted an organisation that could represent local people effectively and could be there, something that they owned and kind of used. We wanted something that had the capacity to manage big projects, to employ staff, manage buildings and bring resources back into use, to be sustainable through social enterprise activity. And we also have this role of supporting a whole network of community groups and volunteers, that some of which we've helped develop and some of which have existed for much longer than ACE. And we wanted an organisation that was seen as credible in the city and that could speak with some authority. So our values and approaches, we have deep roots within our community. Over half of our staff now live in the area, and we've been really conscious about how we support people as volunteers and build their skills and capacity to be employees of the organisation. We very consciously bring people together across generations, races, abilities, so we don't tend to work with people in kind of interest groups or identity groups as such. We kind of bring people together. A really good example of that is some great work we did with local refugees who were cooking at our community centre, and then we'd all eat together with some of the local young people and share stories and kind of learn a bit more about each other. We're committed to co-production. We do things with people, not to or for them. Every time we get a chance to speak to the membership, we say that everybody has something to contribute. If anyone's not able to contribute for any reason, everybody loses out as a result. I'm not going to say much more about any of that stuff. It's fairly standard stuff for most of you, I imagine. So that takes us to the question of what are our assets. And I guess I'm going to question the whole notion of what language we use at the end. I'm not particularly comfortable with assets and production and stuff, but we take a broad definition of what our assets are, the things that are valuable or useful in our community. So traditionally, Ely is a place that doesn't have great economic assets. It's in manufacturing industries all sort of collapsed back in the 80s and 90s. Employment is a problem in the area as a result. So what are our assets? We take a very broad definition. It's our social networks and relationships within our community. It's the skills, knowledge and experience that exists as a shared resource. It's our organisation now, which gives us opportunities and power. It's our heritage is a really strong one for us, and I'll explain very briefly why in a minute. Our culture, and then really practical things like buildings, land, equipment, and people's time. So I'm not going to talk about this today, but we do run a time bank that kind of acknowledges the resource that time is locally and facilitates the use of that for all sorts of different things. So a couple of our bits of work that we've done around sort of maximising and using our assets. We have a community centre, our place Dusty Forge, took on about 2.5 years ago. We have a really DIY ethos. We train up local young people and adults in construction skills. So we actually work with them to regenerate bits of the building and bring them into use. And it generates income through rental of space. It's kind of supported the development of a whole bunch of volunteer-led projects, from a community shop to a cafe to a men's shed project and a community garden, all of which are kind of hosted within the building and supported. So it creates this kind of energy in this home for stuff where we can just make it happen. Someone comes with an idea, our philosophy is unless there's a very, very good reason why it can't happen, then we'll find some way of doing it with them. So ACE provides this kind of overarching infrastructure, if you like, and deals with some of the harder sort of stuff, so people can just get on and do what they want to do. And we're redeveloping the building and making good use of it, and maximising the opportunities associated with that. So really important, it's our first kind of home and a place where we can really build our values and express them and kind of create a kind of demonstration of what we're about. And I talk about heritage project because it's a really interesting example of valuing an asset that's been really under kind of used and under recognised. So Ely and Caira have this an incredible heritage, including most notably a huge Iron Age hill fort on the edge of Caira Estate, which is one of the largest in South Wales, nationally significant, very little research done there. And we're looking at, first of all, we recognised that there was a lot of local people who are really interested in their history and they have a lot of knowledge and a real stake in their history. But also, we're sat there looking at these resources and thinking, they're just sat there, they're nationally significant, but we're not making use of them, they're just kind of sat there. So we've teamed up with Cardiff University over the last 5 years and created this whole sort of co-production project around involving local people in researching their heritage. We've run 4 community excavations, big archaeological excavations. First one was run by Time Team, and then we've run 3 or 4 of our own since then. And when Time Team were there, we made sure local pupils were involved, and we kind of really pushed for this kind of community involvement in, and then built the project off the back of it. We've created all kinds of opportunities for routes into higher education. There's a real concern for us that only about 2% of people in Ely, in certain neighbourhoods within Ely, get anywhere near higher education. So for us, this is about a long-term presence for the university in a community that's disadvantaged and hasn't got a look in terms of higher education. So we've built this whole learning thing and research, and we're involving local people in cutting-edge, nationally recognised research. And now the next stage is we've managed to locate a small disused gospel hall that's sat right at the foot of the hill fort, backing up onto the main footpath onto the hill fort and looking out over the estate and the city. It's an incredible location. And when we've now taken that on, we have a lease on the building, and we're working with local people to redesign it as a community heritage centre, and that's funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. So that, when just starting to move into all these questions about how can you, 2 minutes, great, how can you make use of these heritage resources to create tourism, to bring income into the area, to bring people in who might spend some money, what can you then develop off the back of that in terms of social enterprises around selling heritage artefacts, running cafe or restaurant, running school visits, hosting corporate volunteer days up on the hill fort, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really big project, sort of reinterpreting the hill fort, opening it up for people, and really doing that in partnership with local people. You mentioned the Arrowhead. The Arrowhead, very quickly, so our favourite story, well, my favourite story associated with the Caira Heritage Project, and it is all about these stories. So we had a 6-year-old lad who was the first person to, we'd uncovered all this Iron Age artefacts and a lot of Roman stuff, mapped out the footprints of Iron Age roundhouses and all this stuff. And then a 6-year-old lad found a 6,000-year-old arrowhead, Neolithic arrowhead, which basically kicked the history back another 4,000 years. And we discovered this whole, it was the first major settlement in the Cardiff region. So this lad, 6-year-old lad, takes this arrowhead to Professor Neil Sharples. He's this famous kind of, and they identify it together. And that kid will never forget that story. That's a kind of, that's. So we were talking about this yesterday about the significance of that as a story in his life. And we use this whole conversation of what communities did in our area in previous times. We look at the whole power relations with the city. Okay, so Ely is now a sort of marginalised place on the edge of the city. Feels quite distant from where the decisions are being made and the power is. Actually, Ely used to be the centre of power, so we kind of play with these power ideas and use them to kind of talk about how we build power as a community. Just really quickly, the time credit scheme maximises kind of time as an asset. We have a piece of land called the Diana Garden because Princess Diana initially opened a park there that was destroyed within a year, so obviously many years ago. We're bringing that back into use with local people as a community garden. We have some arts projects, building on people's creativity as an asset and opportunity. And we have a project, Dusty Shed, which is a kind of, it's trying to tap into and bring out men who have been very socially isolated. Anyway, the final questions I was going to ask, where is the overlap between co-production and asset-based community development, and does it matter? What are the differences, what are the similarities? How can the two approaches support each other? And then just this whole question, it's sort of come up a little bit in conversation earlier, are we really comfortable with the sort of language we're using? production and assets. It's all very sort of market and capitalist sort of influenced. So anyway, I raise them as genuine questions that I have no answers to. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.